Alright guys, welcome back. In Visual Basic application, special cells generally refer to specific ranges within Excel that meet certain criteria, such as blank cells, cells with errors, cells with constants, or cells with formulas. So here's a table that outlines the some of the special cells type in Excel. So obviously there's more to it, so I encourage you to go and look that up on your own. And also previously we saw how we could access the special cells, right, by using the keyword, by using the shortcut Control G, and if you remembered, we use the blank special cells, right, to populate the blank values. So in this session, instead of recording a macro, we will be actually writing our codes using the special cells method. Okay, so before I proceed to the VBA editor, I also want to point out that it's important to handle cases where no cells meet the specific criteria to avoid runtime error, right? So this will be something that we cover in the debugging and error handling, but I will just show you how to overcome instances where you're running a macro and it so happens that the range that you have identified in your macro does not contain the special cells that you have referenced to. So when the user runs the macro, it's going to result in an error, okay, a debug error. Basically, it's going to give them that native built-in error handling of Excel that leads us to the VBA editor, and that's something that we want to avoid, right? So that's why we do debugging and error handling. I'll be covering that in future sessions, okay? But for now, we'll just go into something very just how to overcome it, right? On the surface, okay? So I'm just going to populate some values, okay? I'm going to populate some values A to P20, and then I'm just going to type in the value 50 and hit Control Enter, okay? Now I'm going to use the special cells formula, so I'm just going to have some cells within this range that are basically referenced in formula. So I'm just going to take the four corners because it'll be easier for us, right? So I'm just going to say equals to this, right? Anytime you have an equal, it's considered formula, right? So I'm just using equal to the cell next to it, okay? Doesn't matter, okay? But if you have the word equal, Excel treats that as a formula, right? So the four corners, okay? Remember the four corners. So I'm going to go into my Visual Basic application. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to view my code, right? Then I'm just going to pull this up, right? Remember how we learned how to set up the VBA editor. So make sure you have it in this form and in this layout, right? It's the best way. So sub special cells. Okay. So I'm just going to dim RNG as just range. Okay. And it's an object, so I'm just going to say set RNG equals to sheet 1. Okay, I'm using sheet 1, which is the code name, not the tab name. Okay, so this is the code name, this is the tab name. Keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to say sheet 1 dot range. I'm just going to use the current region. Okay, you could also use the designate the region using the L rule, etc. But I'll just use the current region. Okay, dot special cells. And what cells are we referring to? Excel. So you're having IntelliSense, so I'm just going to go Control Enter. Okay, done that. And then we're going to close the bracket, of course, right? We're going to close the bracket. So now what we're saying to Excel is in this range, the range is basically this range, and specifically referring to cells that are of formula types. Okay, that's what we're telling to Excel. Now what I want to do is just debug dot print rng dot address to see what we're getting. So I'm just going to run this, and you can see we're getting the four corners, right? These are the four corners. So now let's highlight the four corners so that we can see them better. For that, I'm just going to say range dot interior dot color, and I'm just going to use the VBA color constants, right? To access them, you have to go to VBA, VB, and you have all these list of color constants. Yellow, right? You have the magenta, right? You have the blue. So I'm just going to black, right? These are the color constants, right? So I'm just going to go with VBA dot VB yellow. Okay? And that's about it. Now, if I close, and then I run my macro in this workbook. Okay, I don't know, why do I have a second workbook? All right, we have one workbook open. Okay, never mind. Okay, we're just going to run the macro, and as you could see, it's highlighting all the cells, right? The four corners with formulas in it. Okay, so I told you that you have to be aware of basically what happens if none of the cells that you have specified in your range, right, meets the criteria. Okay, so for example, I have this range. I don't have any formulas in it. Okay, I don't have any formulas in the range I've graphic. Then I run the macro. It's going to result in an error. Okay, so I'll just quickly show you an example as to what I meant by that, right? For example, I could just say A2 to A4. Okay, then I'm just going to say dot special cells. Okay, obviously A2 to A4, right? We don't have any cell types that are of formula, right? So if I run a macro, you see, it's giving me an error. It's giving me an error. Okay, so if you try to debug it from here, you can see that, right? Because there are no formula types in the range that we have defined. So for that, that's why we do error handling in VBA, right? So to avoid this debug error that Excel gives us. So for that, I'm just going to write a simple one-line code. On error, go to. We'll learn all about error handling in the future, right? So don't worry about that. Just remember this: on error, go to leave. So basically, if you see an error, it basically moves to the end of the cell. That's all. Okay, and that's all that there is to it. Now, if I run the macro, right? Macro is running as usual. Obviously, there are no special cells of formula types from A2 to B4, A2 to A4, right? But still, because we have added the error handling, Excel has understood that we don't want to have its native built-in debugging alert. Okay, so that's about it for our special cells guy. I will see you in the next session. Take care.